You started off as a painter, but then moved away from painting to explore areas like installation, sculpture, and public art. Could you talk a bit about how you started as an artist and how you've traveled to the point where you're at right now?
Oh boy, that's a big question.
It is.
A lot of ground.
Yeah.
Well, I grew up in LA,
Yeah.
which was sort of the middle of nowhere in terms of being an artist, with no background for it. My family wasn't interested. I had no one that I knew was interested. I had a facility, one of those kind of magic wrists that kids have, and thought I was going to be an artist. Went to art school and managed to learn nothing really other than to make my magic wrist more magical a little bit in a way. So I got out of art school really naive. Ran into a group of younger artists who formed what was called the Ferris Gallery, which is sort of a seminal gallery in California. And they were younger, but they were smarter, and they were into something much more interesting than I had been aware of, primarily abstract expressionism from New York. So essentially, I swallowed my pride and became their student in a way, as a friend, kicking around with them, and so I began, to get a little bit of an education from them and played games with them. And then at one point, I looked at my own work, which was incredibly superficial, and realized that I was incredibly superficial. That was the problem, and realized that if I was going to be an artist, I was going to have to knuckle down. And so there was a period of about 10 years where I examined all the problems, the issues of my own work and my own superficiality. And it's like a left fielder going all the way to the wall and right to catch a ball. Wasn't very graceful. And essentially the rest of my life fell apart completely, really, because that's all I did every day, 7 days a week. And at the end of that, I had taken painting completely apart and found myself essentially with a kind of set of possibilities and a set of questions, and with absolutely no way to answer them. So I had no way even how to approach it. But I knew if I stayed in the studio and did what I did, what I had become good at in a way, I would never deal with those questions. I would somehow, in one way or another, still practice art from a studio point of view. So I got rid of everything, and the studio and that, and spent about 5 or 6 years or so really just wandering around trying to figure out, where do I go from here. In that period, I decided that since the entire structure of what I was doing and how I thought about things had been completely challenged, that if I was thinking it, somebody else had to be thinking it. And so for a while, I courted some interesting people in other disciplines. A man named Ed Wirtz was probably the pivotal person I spent, who was doing the open research facility for Garrett Aerospace, and Richard Feynman, who was a Nobel Prize winning physicist at Caltech, and started having a dialogue with these people, because I figured how are they thinking about time, space, continuums, et cetera, and all that, and the relation of things in the world, and matter and energy and so on, so, which is what I thought I was involved in. And so that education, in a way, manifested itself in attempting to try and deal with just the qualities of space and the qualities of light, the most minimal, but in a sense the most universal elements. And I did some interesting things and some dumb things, and so that's kind of the base history of how I moved from being a painter to being the paintings. I think I just saw them recently. I had an exhibition that went around Europe and that, and I was surprised, because every time my whole thing was a simple progression where the painting I was painting, I would look at it and critique it in the sense of what made sense and what didn't make sense. And so the next painting was always an attempt to magnify what was good and to eliminate what was bad. So in my mind, each time I just threw them away, because they were no longer relevant. And then to see them 50 years later, they weren't bad paintings, which kind of surprised me.